Rabbi Chaim tells us a beautiful mashal about someone who was an extremely successful businessman. He couldn't keep up. He kept on expanding his business, and there were more customers. Then he had to expand his business more. That brought in more customers. One of those cycles that an awful lot of people would love to be caught in. But his business became so complex and difficult to manage that he was busy with it the entire day, the entire night. He didn't even have time to go to the Beis HaKnesses to daven b'tzibur. Many years passed, and he looked at the white hair in his beard and his ebbing strength, and he started to feel, he's getting closer to the tachlis of being down here in this world. Eventually, Liachamei V'Yasim Shana is going to have to give that din, the cheshbon, and all of his actions, so he decided that it was time to start preparing some tzedel derech at all costs. So he started going to the Beis HaKnesses to daven b'tzibur, and after davening, he learned 2 hours in the Beis HaMedrash, paying no attention to the many customers who were already banging at his doors. What good could they do him eventually? And when he returned from the Beis HaKnesses, after a slow, deliberate geschmacka davening and learning, his wife asked him, "What's the matter with you? Look, deliveries have to be brought in. We can turn over all of his stuff. Customers are here. They knocked. They went away. We'll go to the competition." So first he didn't answer. He told her he was busy. He got held up someplace. On the second day, the same thing happens. Her husband doesn't come home from the Beis HaKnesses until part into the day. She says, "I have to figure out what's going on over here. Who's holding him up?" So she runs to the Beis HaMedrash, looks into the window, and she sees her husband is sitting there learning. So she starts screaming. She says, "What's with you? Have you gone mad? The shop is full of customers. You're sitting here and learning? That you don't want to expand the business anymore is one thing, but how could you send away customers that are standing there waiting to buy?" So her husband answered her, "What if the Malach HaMavos came and said, 'Time to leave. Let's go. We have to go.' Can I say to the Malach HaMavos, 'I don't have time now. Are you out of your mind, Malach? I have a store full of customers.'" Tell me," he said to his wife, "if that happened, if they came and told you the terrible news, your husband left, would you be angry at me that I left a store full of customers? How dare I soar up to Shemayim? No, you would understand. So what does it bother you if I want to wait a couple of years before I go up? I want to hop around a little bit for myself beforehand. I want to have something for my neshama to be able to present itself to the Kisei HaKavod for." So the Chavetz Chaim, that's shot in the Chazal, this is Parsha Zoyis HaTorah Adam Ki Yomis B'Yoyel. Ein Devei Torah Miskayim Elo B'Misha Neimis Atzmei Olel. Let a person imagine, Rahman al, not in a way that it should depress him, but let a person imagine if Chas v'Shalom, it was time to go, Liachamei V'Yasim Shana. Then all of his tirutzim, he has no time, he has to take care of this, he has to look into his investments, he must take care of that business, he has to take this course, he has to, all of these he has to crumble away like dried leaves in the wind. It's meaningless. So why wait until he's an old man, Liachamei V'Yasim Shana, and he is indeed getting the divine call to come up? Do it earlier. And spend a good part of your life down here in a meaningful way. No one ever died saying, "Oh, if only I had more time in the office." Later on in the parasha, we find when the Yidden arrived at the boundary of Edom, they hoped to cross the country and enter Eretz Yisrael immediately. Edom refused, and that meant they would have to spend much more time circling around in the Midbar. That was a blow for the Bnei Yisrael. They were tired of the long years of wandering. They wanted to go into Eretz Yisrael already. So they complained to Moshe Rabbeinu, and they said, "Why have you taken us out of Mitzrayim to die in the Midbar? We were almost at the border of Eretz Yisrael. Now we must turn back into the desert. Haven't we been wandering enough?" And the emissaries of the Mefarshim say when they came to the boundary of Edom, and they envisioned the hardships of not being able to cross the boundary of Edom, they also saw the Nevuah, all the difficulties of Golis Edom. They saw the Crusades, they saw the Gzeiros of Tach and Taf, they saw World War II. And Memela, they were depressed, they were discouraged. And they began to argue on Moshe Rabbeinu. We have to subsist on man, which is an unnatural food. We're afraid it will eventually burst in our stomachs. We don't relieve ourselves from the man. How much could the stomach take? They refer to the man as lechem hakloikel. Now, why would the Torah even repeat such a thing about the man? Why would the Torah repeat these words? Now, when someone says something degrading about someone else, and the other person or a third person wants to repeat it, so we always hide behind the disguise of quotation marks. So-and-so said, quote, this and this, end quote, as if to say, I'm not saying it, he's saying it. But Lamaisi, you said it. Lamaisi, you put the idea in other people's heads. And the people who are listening to this quote say, a little bit is not true. Chofetz Chaim says, Lahalacha, if a husband gets embarrassed in shul, don't go home to your wife and say, you know what so-and-so said about me? Because his wife is going to think, well, he's a little bit right, even if she doesn't say it. Terrible damage is done in repeating what other people say, even in the form of course, it's not what I'm saying, it's what he said. So why should the Torah even repeat these words? Why should the pasuk refer to the man as lechem hakloikel? Father used to tell me, I believe the Shem Bekatzka, that there was a little bit of a time on the man. The man sort of spoke Lashon Hara on Klal Yisrael. You see, the tzaddikim had the man fall right in front of their door. The people that weren't such tzaddikim had to walk a little bit to collect their man, and the Rishayim had to walk very far to collect their man. So in a sense, the man sort of told people who's who. And the nail, or anything that in any way degrades another yid, becomes vulnerable to criticism. Now, again, Chas Hashem, the Torah is not referring to the man as lechem hakloikel. The Torah is quoting what they said. But the mere quote is a lesson to us in its own right. In any event, the people in their frustration were speaking against the man that purified their neshamas, against the man that purified their guf, against the man that sustained them in the most sweetest, tastiest, ruchniistic way for all these years. And when you speak Lashon Hara against someone that you really ought to owe a karas atayv to, that's the worst kind of Lashon Hara. So there was an immediate manifestation of their words in a terrible way. A Basko proclaimed, after all the kindness I performed for you, you're dissatisfied. I gave you a marvelous food, the man that is totally absorbed by the body. The reason one doesn't relieve himself from the man is because there's nothing bad in it, that the body has to separate and to excrete. So I spared you from the unpleasant necessity of leaving the camp to relieve yourself. And your route around the land of Edom was also intended for your benefit, so you don't suffer harm from the Edomim, so you can conquer the kingdoms of Sichon and Og. So Hashem said, let the snake, whose food tastes like dust, but it doesn't complain, punish those who complain about the food that had all the pleasant tastes in the world, anything you could imagine. And the Rebbeinu Shalom sent poisonous snakes to inflict fatal bites upon some of the complainers against the man. Others were fatally beaten by wild dogs and scorpions. And the complainers realized they had done wrong, and they fell down before Moshe. They confessed. They said, be mispal for us. And Moshe immediately forgave them. And what did the Rebbeinu Shalom tell Moshe Rabbeinu to do? The Yemer Hashem Moshe Seilecha Saraf, the Simai Seyal Neis, the Hayakala Nashuch, the Rebbeinu Shalom told Moshe Rabbeinu to fabricate a large serpent named Sarah, attach it to the top of a high pole so that it was visible from any point in the Machna, and the yid who was bitten by a wild dog or a scorpion will be healed by simply glancing quickly at the Sarah. When he receives a snake bite, he has to gaze more intently in order to recover. Now when the pasuk describes the original biting of the snakes, the pasuk says, "V'yanashchu es ha'am." It bit the people, and as a result, "V'yamas amrav me Yisrael." So we have to understand why in the attack the Torah refers to Klal Yisrael as the and then the manifestation of the attack was amrav me Yisrael. That's one shaila the Chofetz Chaim presents to us. Furthermore, the pasuk says that hanechashim hasrafim, the many snakes with the burning venom attacked them. Yet when they pleaded with Moshe Rabbeinu to save them, they said, "V'yasem me'aleinu es hanachash," the snake, singular. And the third question is, so v'yispal Moshe ba'ara'am, Moshe was mispal for them, but in Mitzrayim, and Moshe Rabbeinu was mispal for power to take away the tzvardim, it wasn't necessary to go and make some type of a big tzvardeya and hang it up on a pole. Moshe was mispal, and Hashem took away the tzvardim. So how come over here that wasn't the instant reaction? But Yispal Moshe Ba'ara Amen, right away the Nechashim should have left. Why was it necessary to have to go through this entire procedure? Dr. Chavetz Chaim. When a person is over an Aveira, he creates a malach, a tangible reality. When we have to come to our din v'cheshbon, we will see the Aveira. The malach created by the Aveira doesn't have to say anything. The mere fact that he is in existence already testifies to the reality of the Aveira, unless, of course, the person is a tshuva. There is a difference, however, between the Aveira malach that is created through Lashon Hara and Stam an Aveira malach. You see, the Aveira malach created through Lashon Hara has a mouth to prosecute. Because the malach assumes the appearance and it has the infrastructure of the Aveira itself. So they say from the Rebbe of Zisha, from others, they never saw a whole Aveira malach. Because even when a Yid doesn't have Aveira, he has a guilty conscience, it takes away part of the brunt of the malach. But when you speak Lashon Hara, you create not just a malach that is there, it's not just his presence that testifies that an Aveira was done. This malach speaks. And what is it? Because the malach has the infrastructure of the Aveira itself. The act is what designs what the malach looks like. And through Lashon Hara, the malach has a mouth that speaks Lashon Hara. Unfortunately, it speaks Lashon Hara and prosecutes against the person who created it. So we find this Lashon in the Medrash that Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu writes L'hishtatev klal in Baal Lashon Hara l'haslois in Mitzraysav. There's no Eitzah, only not to speak Lashon Hara. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Mikol tzorei sabois aleichem ani yochel l'hatzal eschem. When it comes to Lashon Hara, you better hide. Mashal La'ashir, the Chavetz Chaim brings from the Medrash, who had a friend, and he told him, you should know there's a wild dog that's going around biting people over here. Listen to me, my son. If you owe money to someone, don't hide from him. I'll pay that person. But if you see this wild dog, hide, because if he bites you, there's nothing I can do for you. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, B'shesh soros yatzilcha, but when it comes to Lashon Hara, you better hide. And the Chavetz Chaim quotes the Zohar, Rav Shimon, Al Kula, Machal Kutsha Beruchu, Bar Min Lishna Disha. And the problem is, the Chavetz Chaim explains, when an Aveira malach is presented by the din, so Hashem, the Rachmav HaMerubim, removes him. And he doesn't complain. We're mispal, Lahasir, Satan, Ufanenu, Me'achrenu. But this malach, when you start removing him, he has a mouth to speak. He says, what do you mean you're removing me? I want this person punished. Because he was created through Dibur, so he responds in kind. The king wants to pardon someone. But if the king's adversary is there, the prosecutor is there and says, I'm going to turn this country upside down and demand why you pardoned him, it becomes a problem. Even though HaKadosh Baruch Hu can do whatever he wants regardless, but Melech b'mishpat Yamid Eretz, it works with a sense of mishpat. So really it was just the masses of people that spoke Lashon Hara. The Yashalach Hashem ba'am, that's why it says first ba'am, it's in a chashim v'asrafim. But the taina isn't only on the masses that speak Lashon Hara. The taina is on where are the leaders of Klal Yisrael that are supposed to be mechanech then. Did you train your children to treat each other with respect? Or did your children hear by your Shabbos table the way you were bereading every Rebbe and every Rosh Hashiva in the book? So of course they do so as well. They emulate. So it started with the Lashon Hara that the people spoke. But when it came to punishment, the Chavetz Chaim, the Yomas Amravni Yisrael, even the Chasha, the people who didn't actually speak Lashon Hara, were also punished for not being madrach their children, their talmidim, their dar, not to speak Lashon Hara. The term Nachash refers to the first Nachash, the Mekatreg, the Satan, that is Mekatreg in Klal Yisrael, that gains vigor and strength through Lashon Hara. Klal Yisrael, realizing what they did, went and they were mispal to Moshe Rabbeinu the Yasser Me'aleinu as a Nachash. So Lechatchila it says that the Nachashim, the snakes, came and bit them. That they understood was a manifestation of their actions. But that gave koyach to the Nachash, to the Yetzer Hara in general, to be Mekatreg, and therefore they begged for Moshe Rabbeinu the Yasser Me'aleinu as a Nachash. Take away the Malach in Shemayim, the ultimate Yetzer Hara that is being Mekatreg on us. We are sorry. They knew once the Nachash and Shemayim will stop being Mekatreg, the Nachashim, the physical Nachashim down here in this world will wither away. And therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Moshe, in regard to other Aveiros, I can take away the Mekatreg. I can just say to the Malach, disappear. But when you have a Malach created by Lashon Hara that can talk, because the Aveira talked, he says, what do you mean you're telling me to go away? I thought you run this world with justice. Where's the justice? These people ought to be punished. So therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I will give you a solution. Make this serpent. Chazal say, by gazing at the snake, that causes death or life. It wasn't the looking at it, it was the lesson learned from looking at it. Klal Yisrael looked at the snake and said, you see, when you speak Lashon Hara, it's not just a passing word that's going to evaporate in the air. You create a tangible reality that will seek to destroy you. By gazing at the snake, it was emphasized to Klal Yisrael the harsh reality of what a person creates when he speaks Lashon Hara. That's what you're going to have to contend with. That's what you're going to have to deal with. And once Klal Yisrael absorbed that lesson, and they were meshabed their hearts, lavim shebashamayim, and they were going to look to make amends in any Lashon Hara they spoke in the past, and a firm Kabbalah for the future, that type of an attitude was enough even to undo the damage of the Satan created by Lashon Hara. And the Yanis is the Yeruchayim HaKadosh explained that this is a tremendous chizik for Klal Yisrael. Sometimes a person reaches a frustrating point in his life and he's discouraged, and he says things he ought not to say, does things he ought not to do, thinks things he ought not to think, and as a result he feels, after those types of aveiros, what's the point? So the Rebbeinu Shem says, look, Klal Yisrael to a certain extent did a tremendous aveiro over here. They spoke against Hashem, they spoke against Moshe Rabbeinu, they complained, and despite that, you're willing to do tshuva. If you're willing to analyze the causes and reactions of your deed and to rectify it, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says if you do tshuva me'ahava, the aveiros turn into mitzvahs. So this very nachash that was the symbol of destroying Klal Yisrael now became the symbol of their life. As if to say, never get discouraged. If you've put yourself into a difficult situation because of your aveiros, do tshuva, and this very difficult situation will turn into your greatest source of bracha. Interestingly enough, what was the end of this nechash and nechash that Moshe Rabbeinu made? Chizkiyahu Melech Yehuda, the great tzaddik, went and destroyed it. Why? Because the people started looking to it as an avodah zarah. So they were completely distorting the reason for making it. The purpose of the nachash was for people to look and say, that's what I do when I do an aveira? I must do tshuva. Can you imagine what chusim I create when I do a mitzvah? But when they started serving it as an independent entity and not using it as a means of analyzing their own actions and relationship with the Rabbeinu Shalom, it defied its very purpose. Chizkiyahu destroyed it, and indeed Chazal praised him for it.
A child comes into class late, and the teacher asks him, why are you late? And the child says, my father drove me to school, and on the way we had a flat tire. Reasonable response. He also adds, I woke up this morning with a terrible stomachache. Okay. In addition to that, the elevator got stuck on the way down. And furthermore, my mother wasn't feeling well, and I had to help her. And then the front doors to our apartment house were stuck. We couldn't get them open. And after I walked out, but before he gets to the next excuse, the teacher says, what if you step into the principal's office and give him your list of excuses? What was the mistake over here? Had the student stopped with the flat tire, either it was true or it wasn't, but it was reasonable. Had he just said that he wasn't feeling well, that also would have been reasonable. Had he just said that he stayed home to help his mother, okay, as long as it didn't happen too often, the teacher may let it pass. But the fact that he came with this long shopping list of excuses, which he presented in rapid fire one after the other, that clearly spelled out the picture that none of these excuses are the reason that he's late. And therefore let the principal deal with it. I heard this mashal from my Mishgiach in regard to several different things, and I think it can be applied to what Chazal tell us about the chet of Mei Meriva. What exactly was Moshe Rabbeinu's sin? What was the reason that Moshe Rabbeinu could not go into Eretz Yisrael? The Yeruchayim HaKadosh brings 10 reasons, 10 different pshatim as to what the chet of the Mei Meriva was. First he quotes Rashi. HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu to speak to the stone, and Moshe Rabbeinu hit the stone. The second shot out of 10. The Ibn Ezra says that because of his arguments with Klal Yisrael, he caused it only to produce water after the second time that he hit it. Where had Moshe Rabbeinu been concentrating on the stone and not to argue with Klal Yisrael, the water would have come out after the first time that he hit it. Another suggestion the Ibn Ezra has is the third shot, that he shouldn't have hit it a second time at all. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, speak to a stone, that's the way you speak to a stone. You hit it, but only once, not twice. The fourth shot, also from the Ibn Ezra, the chet was that they didn't say Shira al Hamayin. There wasn't enough of a thank you afterwards. The fifth shot he brings, Moshe Rabbeinu spoke too rough with Klal Yisrael. He said to them, Shemina Hamayim, listen here, you rebels. You're angry at Klal Yisrael. You don't like the way they're responding. You don't like the way they're asking for water. But no name calling. The sixth shot the Yerushalayim HaKadosh brings from the Rambam. It's not so much that he referred to them as Shemina Hamayim, but in general, Moshe Rabbeinu got frustrated and angry with Klal Yisrael. And because he was angry, therefore the Rambam says the Yidden thought that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was angry at them. And being that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was not angry at them, therefore this message that Moshe Rabbeinu gave them is the chet of the name Merida. Trying to tell someone that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is angry at you when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not angry at you, when really you're the one that's angry. But let's not forget we're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu over here, but still, Ein Mikra Yotze Midei Pshutai. This is a very frightening thought. Because in the course of chinuch, we do this very often. A child does something which you feel is a breach in the way you are machanech your child, and you're really angry at him. So you present your anger in the form of, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is angry at you. How dare you do this? You shagif, you machal Shabbos, and so on. And really, it could very well be that you're the one that's upset. You're interpreting what the child is doing as something that's going to embarrass you. Yet you're shifting the anger to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is angry at you. Is it HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or is it you that is angry at the child? Don't use the Rebbeinu Shalom to justify what's really bothering you. Now, let me give you an example of this. Several years ago, someone came over to one of the mechanechim in my yeshiva, and he told him the story that we hear only too often b'zman hazeh. A child, Rahman al-Islam, dressed in a very frub levush, really looks like a very yeshivish child, or chassidish child. It doesn't make a difference. But if you saw him on the street, you'd say, yeshiva bacher, sits outside. Look at that hat, look at that jacket. Unfortunately, this child, Rahman al-Islam, the Eibishter upheated, sat a whole day in front of his television set, in front of his computer, surfing on the internet, and he did so not 6 days a week, but it's difficult to say he did it 7 days a week. The father has no control over the child. Finally, the father worked up enough courage to ask someone for help. So this particular mechanech said, he'll call people that are Isaac in this. And indeed, he called up a certain young man, and he asked him to establish a contact with the child. And this young man, this Askin, did, and he developed a very strong kasher with the child. And it bore fruit right away. The child promised he would not be Machal Shabbos anymore. The child put on tefillin for the first time in 6 months. The father did not know that the tefillin stayed in his bag. So you would think, Gevaldik, Baruch Hashem. May the Rebbeinu Shalom help that there should be many more such Yingalite that have this power, that have this kayach. The father should be jumping for joy. He got his child back, right? Well, the father met this particular mechanech, who was the shadchan, who called in this young man to talk to the child, and he said to him, do me a favor. I'd like you to break the relationship. I don't want that young man to talk to my child anymore. So the mechanech said, why not? What's wrong? And he looked around to make sure nobody was listening, and he said to him, your son was Machal Shabbos. He didn't put on tefillin, Rahman al-Islam. He's bringing him back. So the father said, yeah, but people see them together on the street, and this young man is working with him. I don't know, he's not dressed as yeshivish as my family is. And I'm scared, like he has like some modern hashkafos, and it may have an effect on my child. It's not as heinish as I would like my child to be. You know, my father-in-law said to me, how come they're together in the street? What kind of friends does your child have? I don't want them to be together anymore. Don't laugh. It's not the first time I've heard a story like this. So you're going to say, this father has to be out of his mind. He had a child that was Machal Shabbos that didn't put on tefillin. He probably wasn't even allowed to look at the wine at the Shabbos table. Now he doesn't want us to have any shaykhs with this young man because his suit isn't as dark as he would like. What's the rationalization? Does it make any sense? The answer is it does. Because let's backpedal a little bit. Yes, the father was distraught over what was happening with his son. That his son was sitting, Rahman al-Islam, and being Machal Shabbos. But was he concerned with his Yiddishkeit? Or was he concerned with what is his neighbor going to say? What is his father-in-law going to say? What is his family going to say when they find out about this? So in the eyes of this father, maybe, if he really analyzed what was bothering him, it wasn't that his son was being over on the Yeseres Adibris. It wasn't that he was a Paishi Yisrael B'gufay Kakaftet Le'munach Tefillin. The problem was, what are the neighbors going to say? What is his cousin going to say? What is his father-in-law going to say? So, therefore, if the problem of tefillin and the problem of Shabbos or the problem of Amunah, if all of that was being solved, that didn't really solve the problem. Because that wasn't the father's problem to start with. The problem the father had to start with is, what is his father-in-law going to say? His father-in-law did not know what he was doing behind closed doors on Shabbos afternoon. But he will see him walking on the street with this young man who is not dressed the way he would like his anical to be dressed. This was problematic. And again, I've heard this story several times. I know someone who was Isaac with this. He got a child that was so off the derech, never mind off the derech, he was going in the opposite direction. And he started putting on tefillin again, and he started being a Shomer Shabbos again. And this man called up the father. He said, this is a different story. He said, take your child back into the house. He's a different child. And the response was, as long as he doesn't cut his hair shorter, he should not come anywhere near my house. Again, because why did he throw him out of the house? Not because of the Chil Shabbos. He threw him out of the house because he was embarrassed that his hair was longer than he would like. Now, I don't want to sound insensitive. Rahman al-Islam, when someone has these kinds of problems with children, of course, the busha of neighbors, of other family members, and especially when other family members and neighbors say things they ought not to say in regard to a problem like this. The busha of Gehenna, the embarrassment could destroy a person. I'm not dismissing this. But in order to solve a problem, one has to be very realistic, to analyze himself and identify what is the problem. Is it the Rabbeinu Shalom or is it yourself? If it's the Rabbeinu Shalom, then you would be happy when the child starts becoming Shomer Shabbos again, and when the child starts putting tefillin on again. And you would want him to continue any relationship with someone that is pushing him in that direction. But if your primary focus is on what people are going to say, so naturally, the Shmir Shabbos and the Tefillin doesn't really help you. And in a sense, sometimes this is part of the problem. Because when a parent says to the child, you shake it, which you should never say. But when he says that, the child feels, you don't care about my Yiddishkeit, you care about what people are going to say. You're not sincere. If what's bothering you is the Rabbeinu Shalom, then make sure you represent the Rabbeinu Shalom, not yourself. So in a sense, and again we're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu over here, but in terms of a simple lesson, what the Rambam is saying is that the Kapeda was Moshe Rabbeinu got angry at the people, and the people understood that to be Hashem's anger, and there was somewhat of a discrepancy over here. Moshe Rabbeinu was representing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but Moshe Rabbeinu was more angry than HaKadosh Baruch Hu was, and that was the Chet. chashvu ki gam Hashem dekas imohem asher lo ken haya. The Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh quotes the Rambam. The seventh reason for the Chet Mei Meriva comes, as the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh quotes it from the Rabbeinu Chananel, and the Ramban agrees with this. The Kapeda was that Moshe Rabbeinu said, from this stone, Noitzi lachem mayim, and he didn't say Yoitzi lachem. Now Moshe Rabbeinu meant that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was going to have the water come out of the stone, but the term Noitzi, al pi digduk, suggests that there was a power in this stone, somehow, that water came out of it. It was a natural thing. This stone produces water. As opposed to Yoitzi lachem mayim, where there would be a clear explanation that there is nothing inherent in the nature of the stone that has anything to do with producing water, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu will make water come out of the stone. He will do it. So it was simply a mistake in the presentation. And that was the Kapeda. Lehamantili lahagdisheni. That's how the Rebbeinu Chananel learns, that's how the Ramban learns. The eighth pshat the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh brings, and he brings it from Rabbeinu Meir HaKayin and Rabbeinu Moshe HaKayin, that again, Moshe Rabbeinu's lashon was the problem. He said, leaving some doubt, at least temporarily, in the minds of Klal Yisrael whether HaKadosh Baruch Hu could produce the water from this stone. Once again, an issue of the way Moshe presented it. The Sefer Ikrim brings a different shot which really requires a shiur on its own, and that is that Moshe and Aaron should have on their own sort of bringing the water out of the stone. They should have not waited for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to command them to do it. We have to remember that they had the Ber Shel Miriam until now. So if it stopped, you shouldn't have waited for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to do something. You should have gone on your own and assumed that the water is going to continue. Be more at that level of the Tachai, and it would keep on coming. The fact that there was even some doubt over here or some question, how are we going to get the water? This was reflected as a taina on Moshe and Aaron for not maintaining the level of the Tachai in Klal Yisrael. It should have come simultaneously. Then he brings a 10th pshat from the Baal Maaseh Hashem, a very interesting pshat, the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh brings, that there was a vekuach, there was a beit over here between Moshe and Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael wanted the water should come out from a particular stone that they dug out. And Moshe did not want to speak to that stone. And in his anger, whether he should talk to this stone or talk to a different stone, Moshe Rabbeinu threw his stick at the stone. His kavanah wasn't to hit the stick so that the water should come out. He threw his stick out of frustration that he had to argue with Moshe Rabbeinu as to which stone to talk to. And when the stick hit the stone, the water came out. So he now lost his mitzvah of talking to the stone. Instead, the water came out through hitting the stone. The Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh goes into a long beer and analysis to explain, to have kashas and tirutzim of these respective 10 different pshatim. But what's important to understand is, when you have 10 different reasons as to what the chet is, it's like the child with the 10 different excuses. Maybe a little bit of everything was true. But the fact that there were so many different excuses tells us that there's another underlying factor over here, and that is in that particular mashal that the child is simply late, and it has to be dealt with. Moshe Rabbeinu could not go into Eretz Yisrael. Why? Because Klal Yisrael lost part of their madrega. There would have to be a galus. And if Moshe Rabbeinu would build a Beis HaMikdash, there can never be a galus, because what Moshe Rabbeinu does is nitzchias. And the truth is that was the reason David HaMelech himself could also not build a Beis HaMikdash. Yes, there were other official reasons, because he spilled the blood, because the money that he put away for the Beis HaMikdash, he should have distributed when the people were starving, and he kept it for the Beis HaMikdash. But, and putting all of these things into perspective, the underlying factor was, the Mefarshim explained, had David built the Beis HaMikdash, it would have to stay. And L'maisa, Klal Yisrael wasn't worthy of it. There would be a galus. And that's, of course, why Moshe Rabbeinu wanted so desperately to go into Eretz Yisrael. Because he knew that there would be a galus. He knew there would be the tzaros of the various different exiles, and he wanted to avoid it. But we weren't worthy. So as a result, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't go into Eretz Yisrael officially because of the chet of Mei Meriva. But the fact that it is so unclear what the chet Mei Meriva is should give us the underlying message that despite all of these reasons, whatever the Rishonim say is emes, but there's another underlying message. And that is, Moshe Rabbeinu simply could not go into Eretz Yisrael. Many of them. The father used to always say to me, I believe from the Altaf in the Vardik or one of the Mashgichim of the famous Litvische yeshivas. In the Midrashim, we seem to find of a kuach. Moshe wanted a certain stone, the stone that Kadosh Baruch Hu told him, and the other Yidden said, no, you pick our stone. Because that's going to prove it's not an inherent power in the stone, but it's the Kadosh Baruch Hu's command. And Moshe Rabbeinu made a decision. He said, you know what? I'll draw the water from the stone that you say. Even though he knew he was violating what the Kadosh Baruch Hu told him, because the Kadosh Baruch Hu said, pick this stone. But Moshe said, I'm going to be Moshe Nefesh myself. I'll lose everything. But it's worth it there should be a Kiddush Hashem. To show the people that it's the Rabbeinu Shalom. They shouldn't have an excuse to say there's some type of natural phenomenon over here. L'maisa, what happened? When Moshe Rabbeinu hit the stone, their stone, all the stones started giving water. So he saw that had he listened to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he would have had the Kiddush Hashem anyhow. And again, we're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu, but the Pashut lesson for us is, often the Eitzah tries to trick us into fact by saying, sacrifice yourself and sin l'shem shemayim. That's a mistake, because when you do what you're supposed to do, HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes care of the l'shem shemayim. The famous Reb Leibele Eger, who later became a Kotzker Chassid, once said that when he was small, he was learning with his grandfather, Rebbe Kiva Eger, and he witnessed the following story. Rebbe Kiva Eger was sitting with his lifelong friend, the Chavastas of Yaakov Melissa, the Nesivas, and they were engaged in a heated discussion about a sugya. And just then, Rebbe Kiva Eger's illustrious son-in-law, the Heilige Chassam Sofer, came to visit, and he joined in the conversation. Rebbe Kiva Eger had asked that such great tzaddikim were there, they should prepare a Suda, and of course the conversation continued on into the Suda. And one of the Bachrim from the yeshiva was called in, and he was acting as the waiter. It was a tremendous chus, and he was bringing in the food, listening in to the conversation between his trips to the kitchen. And the Chavasdas was very adamant about a certain shita that he had about a sugya, and the Chassam Sofer asked many kashas on it. And the debate got very, very heated, and it looked like the Chassam Sofer won. Chassam Sofer kept asking kasha after kasha, and he said that, I simply disagree with what you're saying. And the Chavasdas seemed to have some chalishas hadas. Rebbe Kiva Eger noticed this, that the Chavasdas felt bad. So the next time, this bacher who was serving them came in with a course, Rebbe Kiva Eger called him over, and he said, and what do you say about this? And this shamus, this waiter, he answered all of the kashas that the Chassam Sofer asked. Mamish defended the shita of the Chavasdas. And when this bacher finished taking apart all of the Chassam Sofer's kashas and answering each one, the Chassam Sofer began to cry. And he said, the emes, I was right. But if my father-in-law, Rebbe Kiva Eger, would even command a stone to speak, that stone would also be able to freak me out. Because my father-in-law commanded that the honor of the Chavasdas should be defended over here. That's what happened. But Leibele Eger was sitting over there as a child, and he watched this entire episode. And he later told the Chassidim, he said, don't think that what the Chassam Sofer said was just a play on words. He really meant that. This bacher was a simple bacher who learned in the yeshiva. To even associate him with this group of three people, Rebbe Kiva Eger, the Chavasdas, and the Chassam Sofer, was a double rochuk legamli. He was comparing a tiny, tiny pebble to Mount Everest. There was mamish no shaychus. He was Tava Bacher. And besides that, he wasn't even there listening to the whole conversation. He kept on going back and forth serving. He was just listening in from the outside. But what the Chassam Sofer said was emes le'amitai. In the heat of the conversation, it seemed that the Chavasdas had some chalishas hadas. Rebbe Kiva Eger noticed that. He wanted to prevent it, so it was v'dibarta melasela. He spoke to the stone, and the stone started talking Torah. And the stone was able to answer all of the Chassam Sofer's kashas on the Chavasdas. In light of the story, we can perhaps explain a beautiful mahalach about the Chetnei Meriva that is found in the writings of Reb Shamshon Rafal Hershel Chaim Lebrach. The Rebbeinu Shalom told Moshe Rabbeinu, Kachas hamata, the hakel se'eda, ata ve'ara nechicha, v'dibartem alasela, and speak to the stone. It's interesting to note that since the victory over Amalek, we do not find that the staff, that the stick, was ever used. Where was it?
it was deposited, like we see in the Psukim, in the Mishkat next to the Aron HaEdus. The Shlomo explains that the Mata, the staff of Hashem, in the hands of Moshe, officially designated him as being sent by Hashem. And this was in response to the complaints of the Bnei Yisrael. We have to put their complaints into perspective over here. They were yelling at Moshe and Aaron, and they charged Moshe and Aaron with betraying their mission from Hashem. In other words, they said, look what happened. Miriam passed away. The bear of Miriam dried up. We cannot believe, the Bnei Yisrael claimed, that this is in accordance with Hashem's will or Hashem's direction, that we should be led into a waterless place. They blame Moshe and Aaron. You must have misunderstood or somehow misguided us. So the Hashem doesn't wish for us to die of thirst. So this is a very serious claim against Moshe and Aaron. And therefore the Rebbeinu Shalom said, the dafka to take the stick. Remind Klal Yisrael, show them that you are still my messenger. And you have not ceased for one moment to be my servant. When you had that stick in Mitzrayim and you made all of the ma'asim that clearly defined you as my messenger, and people understood that you are bringing them closer to the Rebbeinu Shalom, take that stick again. Show them that that didn't change. Chas v'shalom for them to suggest that you have somehow directed them away from where the Rebbeinu Shalom wants them to be. So the command was, kachas hamata, take the stick, v'hakel esa'eda, and gather the people together. That was a demonstration of whatever I do is the Ratzon Hashem. And wherever I led you is where HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted you to be. You don't understand it? There's a crisis now, there's a time of Messiah, you don't have your water, so you don't understand it. So you have to be Mispal, you have to do tshuva, you have to act accordingly. But don't say because things aren't working out the way you want, so therefore I misled you. Now, the mission of the stick should have stopped right there. The stick was a representation that I am still a Shliach of Hashem. Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu's command was, B'dafka, don't use the stick, but v'dibartem elasel aliyeineya, but speak to the rock in the presence of Klal Yisrael, and demand with mere words, not the use of the stick, demand with your words for the rock to give the water. A blow with the staff would give the impression that the water came as a result of a fresh intervention, and that was Hashem's response to the uproar. In other words, a blow with the stick would have justified the complaint of the Yidden, that somehow Moshe Rabbeinu had misguided them or misdirected them, and now HaKadosh Baruch Hu was making amends. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was bringing them back, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, okay, take the stick and start again. Reinstitute the water because you made a mistake over here. You brought them to a place that doesn't have water. You took a wrong turn. And thus the Yidden would have, at least in terms of perception, been justified in their claims. And therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, no. Hold that stick to show you are my shliach, but speak to the rock. Speaking to the rock will send the opposite message. You see, Klal Yisrael, I don't have to hit the rock. There's no need now for new instructions, for initiating new commands. The water is here for you. All you have to do is ask for it, and the water is there. There are times in life where it appears that everything goes dark, and you seem to be faced with crushing deficiencies that you don't know how you're going to survive it. Instead of saying that somehow there was a mix-up over here in the hashgacha, and you are where you're not supposed to be, simply say, this is part of the Messiah, this is part of the ups and downs in life, be mispalel, and you will see that the refuah is there before the makkah. The Yeshua has been prepared before the problem. The water is here before the thirst. All you have to do is to talk. Had Moshe Rabbeinu spoken to the rock? So this manner of obtaining the water would have convinced the people of the deep wrong they had done in accusing Moshe and Aaron of leading them to this waterless place against the will of Hashem. The fact that Moshe Rabbeinu hit the rock instead of speaking to it really left the matter open for debate. Because again, in terms of perception, many argued, we were right. Moshe Rabbeinu took us to the wrong place where there was no water, and it's a good thing we complained, it's a good thing we yelled and screamed, because Moshe Rabbeinu had to rectify it by once again initiating a new command. by striking the rock again. And this was the great tragedy of Mei Meriva, because if you look into this, this is the aside of our crisis response. If a person gets into a situation where he feels that the walls are caving in on him, and you don't know what to do, so there is tefillah and there is complaint. And there is a danger in complaint. If you can forgive the analogy, suppose you are a teacher in a classroom, and a child is upset about the air conditioning, and he says, "You never turn on the air conditioner. You just want us to suffer. I want the air conditioner on now." Now, if the teacher is going to respond to that by simply walking over to the air conditioner and opening it, so you have justified the child's complaint. In this child's mind, what just happened is the teacher had done a terrible injustice. He is a sadist. He is looking to make us suffer, and it's a good thing I protested. It's a good thing I was defiant. It's a good thing I didn't stand for this, because I forced him to change his evil ways, and I made him open the air conditioner. The room may be cool, but the temper in this child's heart is going to be hotter than ever. And he will approach the next problem in the same manner. Whenever the next thing will not go his way, his response to that will be accusation. His response to that will be the other person always doing something wrong. He will victimize himself, and as a result, that will justify any response whatsoever. After all, Abola Harga, Hashkin the Harga. And in life, when he will have to continue on and live with people and work with people, he will become a very, very difficult personality to deal with, if not impossible. On the other hand, if the response of the teacher would have been, "Look, for whatever your attitude is wrong, that is no way to talk. I understand that you're uncomfortable with the heat. I am sitting over here in the same heat, and when the air conditioner will be opened, then you will understand that it has to be opened at that time." And then suddenly the mechanic walks in, and he changes the filter, and he checks the fuse, and he says, "Okay, it's safe to open the air conditioner now." I'll open the main switch downstairs, and automatically the air conditioner goes on, and the room becomes cool. So it's more than the room that has just become cool. If the child understands what happens, and if the lesson and the response is proper, he now sees that his claims, his complaints were completely unjustified. They were doing more damage than good. And his matter of defiance and protest, if anything, could have permanently broken the air conditioner. But in time, things take their course and place. And when you are supposed to feel comfortable, you will feel comfortable. And if it's done in the right way, then it will be in a permanent fashion. Hopefully, the next time that the air conditioner is not on, the child may pick up his hand and say, "Perhaps, teacher, there is a reason that the air conditioner is not on. Do you think anything can be done on our behalf to hasten its being put into effect? For it is difficult to learn." If he says so respectfully, then perhaps the teacher may say, "Oh, thank you for reminding me," and he may go summon the mechanic and say, "Please come quicker to our room. We are extremely uncomfortable." You can have the same process of events. You can have the same problem and solution. But the attitude in presenting the problem and the nature of responding and presenting the solution can be the difference of training a child to properly speak and live with people, or to destroy him. And this is how the Shamshir Fohosh is really explaining over here the Chet Mei Meriva. The Yidden were desperate, and instead of approaching Moshe Rabbeinu and being mispalel and asking and pleading, they came with accusations that you were wrong, that you misguided us and misdirected us. Albeit perhaps they suggested Moshe Rabbeinu did it inadvertently, but regardless, it was a very serious accusation saying that at any point there was a lapse over here in Moshe Rabbeinu's shlichus from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They were suggesting that Moshe Rabbeinu was taking initiatives on his own. That was not a direct response to what HaKadosh Baruch Hu asked him to do. And Moshe Rabbeinu ought to have allowed the process to take its course and to explain to them that request is fine. Tefillah is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. There's no reason to have to wallow in discomfort. But complaint and accusations is distorting our relationships and ultimately will distort your life. Speaking to the rock would have allowed the air conditioner to eventually open on its own. Banging the rock justifies their complaint and encourage them to respond in the same manner in the future. And there's a warning over here, says Rav Shamshul for every single yid, because ultimately we all face a crisis at one point or another, where we feel that, how did I wind up here without any water? And how am I going to survive? How am I going to deal with this? There are two ways to approach the problem. And knowing that there is a solution, but something is holding it up, perhaps it is even I, what can I do to correct it, or complaint and accusations. What does anyone of some Sefer said? That Rabbi Akiva Eiger simply said to the stone, speak. And he spoke. That this bacher, this shamus, this fine, gentle bacher suddenly stepped in and defended huge lions that were debating each other. It represents the attitude that Rabbi Akiva Eiger had to this particular problem. Here the Chassam Sofer had challenged the Chavos Das, and the Chavos Das had Aglos Nefesh. And Rabbi Akiva Eiger is sitting over here by the table, and he says, this is not the situation that I want. My holy son-in-law is sitting over here. My great friend, the Chavos Das, is sitting over here, the greatest tzaddikim, the most powerful Gaonim of the generation, and there is Chalishus Hadas, there is pain over here, although Chas v'Shalom was never intended. Rabbi Akiva Eiger did not say to his son-in-law, please, respect, don't talk that way to my friend. So Sefer had to respond. If he felt that was right, that was the Metzias, that was the nature of Talmidei Chachamim, you have to say the emes. But there has to be a solution. The ways of Torah are sweet. So Rabbi Akiva Eiger, with his great ni'imus, with the great sweetness of Torah, with the great Kiddush Hashem that projected from him, simply said, as a matter of fact, no. So answer the kashas that the Chavos Das has. And Adarab, had Rabbi Akiva Eiger answered the kashas, then it may have been Chalishus Hadas on part of the Chassam Sofer. But the fact that this bacher answered it made it very obvious. Three such great tzaddikim sitting together is within itself the greatest Kiddush Hashem possible. And Rabbi Akiva Eiger wanted it to stay that way, a sweet Kiddush Hashem without any Aglos Nefesh. And therefore all of Teva is meshubah to that. And we can learn to respond to all of our problems this way. Instead of attacking and complaining and screaming, simply say, Ribono Shel Olam, there was a deficiency, I beg of you, you have Vadai created the Yeshua beforehand. Nothing in this world happens by chance. If I am in a situation where there is no water, so the Vadai, there's a reason, and perhaps I can prompt the schus by respectfully asking Ribono Shel Olam, reveal that water. Don't create the water, because Vada, you have it. You would have never sent me if there's no water. But it has to be Zach, you should reveal it. And this is you see this all the time in relationships. When there is a crisis, it either brings people closer together or rips them apart. And the aside is exactly what Rav Shamshul is saying over here. It depends on how we approach a difficulty. Do we approach it in the form of accusation and complaints and finger pointing, or do we approach it as the Ribono Shel Olam show us the way out? Look what the Yidden lost over here because of their complaining. They lost Moshe Rabbeinu. They lost him going into Eretz Yisrael with them, and as a result, Moshe would not build the Beis HaMikdash, and the Beis HaMikdash would be destroyed, and all of our tzaras, all of our pain of Golus comes from the attitude of complaint instead of request. Pointing the finger at someone else, saying, why did you get me into this? Instead of pointing the finger at ourselves and saying, what can we do to solve the problem? This is the key to every relationship. It is the key to how we are mispaled to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it is the key to getting Moshe Rabbeinu back and a Beis HaMikdash that will last forever.
This shiur is distributed by Kol Hadas, 11 Stay Chenet Street, Yerushalayim. For donations, please call 02-5383-999. Fax 02-538-0267. Postbox 57035.